Welcome to the American Indian and Alaska Native Behavioral Health webinar series, presented by the National American Indian and Alaska Native Addiction Technology Transfer Center. I'm Kate Trams, and I'll be administering today's webinar. Today, Dr. Felicia Gaither will be presenting an overview of the Tribal Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program. This training series is brought to you by the National American Indian and Alaska Native Addiction Technology Transfer Center, or ATTC. We are one of 4 national focus centers which serve the ATTC network. The ATTC network also includes 10 regional centers, a network coordinating office. To learn more about our center, the network, or your regional center, please visit our website. Our next webinar in this series is scheduled for Wednesday, October 1st, when Ray Dahl will present Nutrition and Behavioral Health. We also offer the Essential Substance Abuse Skills webinar series each month. The next session in this series will be held on September 17, when Brenda Hill and Ed Haycraft will present Counseling Families, Partners, and Significant Others. For more information on our webinar series, you can contact me at the email address or number provided on this slide. Our center is a NADAC certified educational provider, and we'd be happy to provide you with CEHs for a $15 fee. The CEH request form is available for download in the Files pod in the webinar screen. I will also be sending this form in a follow-up email to all who attended. Immediately following today's webinar, you will be redirected to our GPRA evaluation. GPRA stands for Government Performance and Results Act, and SAMHSA asks us to evaluate our events in order to comply with this act and provide improved performance assessment and accountability. This survey asks about your satisfaction with the event and will take less than 10 minutes to complete. We thank you in advance for helping us to improve our programs. Before we start today's session, I'd like to go over a few instructions for the Adobe Connect system. To view the presentation in full screen mode, click on the full screen button at the top right corner of the presentation pod, which looks like 4 arrows pointing outward. To return to the regular view, click the button again. You'll be muted for the duration of this webinar. Please use the Q&A pod to share your questions and comments, and we will address questions at appropriate points during the presentation. We would also like you to be aware that this webinar records participant attention time. If you minimize the webinar or are working in another window, the system will record your participation as inactive, which may be reflected in the number of CEHs received. The opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the presenter and do not necessarily reflect the official position of CSAT, SAMHSA, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Today's webinar is presented by Dr. Felicia Gaither. Dr. Gaither is the Director of the Division of Tribal Temporary Assistance for Needy Families with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Office of Family Assistance. She oversees the Tribal TANF program, as well as the Native Employment Works program and the grant which provides assistance to regional offices, states, and tribes administering the TANF program throughout the nation. We're thrilled to have her be a part of our webinar series to share about these programs and her experience. Welcome, Dr. Gaither, and thank you so much for joining us. I'll pass things over to you at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Kate. Greetings and welcome again to the overview of the Tribal Temporary Assistance for Needy Families overview. As stated, I am Felicia Gaither. I'm the Division Director for the Tribal TANF Management Division here in the Office of Family Assistance. Our division is responsible for 3 programs that serve in Native communities. The Tribal TANF program, the Tribal Native Employment Works program, which is a jobs program centered around helping adults in Native communities to provide supportive services and education and employment opportunities. And also I am responsible for, and our office is responsible for, the Tribal TANF Child Welfare Discretionary Grant Program. And that program is mainly focused on reducing the number of children being placed in out-of-home care and really increasing the collaboration between child welfare agencies and tribal TANF agencies. So thank you for joining this afternoon. Okay, slides aren't working.
Sorry about that. Are you Let's see.
I'm here.
Okay. And are you able to click on the arrows on the presentation pod? Are those showing up for you?
There we go.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. In today's webinar, the outline of our presentation today is basically I will provide you with a Tribal TANF overview, giving you the background of Tribal TANF, the purposes for Tribal TANF, the use of funds, how tribes can start a Tribal TANF program, our current sources of guidance, and I'll also leave you with our regional office contacts. Though I am located here in Washington, D.C., we work with 10 regions across the United States, which are the main regions for the Department of Health and Human Services. And in those regions, we have program managers that are responsible for both state and tribal TANF work. And so I'll leave you with their contact information as well. Okay. The Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996, also known as PERWORA, repealed aid to families with dependent children, or as we all knew it, AFDC, and created the TANF program. PERWORA also gave federally recognized tribes the opportunity to operate their own TANF programs, and currently we have 60, as of October 1, we will have 69 tribal TANF programs administering tribal TANF across the nation. And most of those programs are west of the Mississippi. We only have one on the East Coast, but all other programs are out in the Midwest and beyond. And these programs serve, these 69 programs represent approximately 300 federally recognized tribes and Alaskan Native villages. Our current annual funding at this point is about $190 million for tribal TANF. And I should add that for Native Employment Works, we have 79 programs, and that funding is about $7.6 million. And then there's 14 tribal TANF child welfare programs, discretionary grants that are at about $2 million. And the tribal TANF programs, they fluctuate. And so at any point in time, a tribe can come in and apply, if they are a federally recognized tribe, to administer their own tribal TANF program. And as we go through these slides, you'll come to see how that is done. Okay. As stated previously, PERWORA established TANF, and it has also established the 4 statutory purposes of TANF. These 4 purposes are: Purpose 1, provide assistance to needy families so that children may be cared for in their own homes or in the homes of relatives. Purpose 2, end the dependence of needy parents on government benefits by promoting job preparation, work, and marriage. Purpose 3, prevent and reduce the incidence of out-of-wedlock pregnancies. And Purpose 4, encourage the formation and maintenance of 2-parent families. And if you know or are used to hearing those terms, we really do refer to them as Purpose 1, Purpose 2, Purpose 3, and Purpose 4. The next slide will help to hopefully break this down. So here we have a graphic that was created that helps us to explain the TANF program. At the top of the graphic is TANF, of course, and then it moves down into the 4 purposes. So you'll see the 4 purposes going across: Purpose 1, 2, 3, and 4, as I stated from the last slide. And from there we identify the 2 populations that the TANF program serves. That is needy families and then other eligible families. When we say needy families, we mean families that are financially eligible under the income and resource limits that the tribe establishes. And then when we use the term other eligible families, that's if a tribe chooses to serve other eligible families, they can create objective criteria that may or may not include financial criteria and establish that those families can be served also. So those are our 2 populations. And then at the bottom of the graphic, we have 2 categories as well: services provided under the TANF program. The first is assistance, which is also often thought of as cash assistance, benefits, vouchers. And the second type of service is supportive services, which is everything else provided under the TANF program. I'll go into more detail later in the coming slides, but For now, I just wanted to use this graphic to kind of demonstrate how we think of TANF and the purposes and the populations or individuals that are served under TANF. I talked about the needy families or parents language and the purposes, and so hopefully you can see in the graphic where we have the purposes and how the arrows follow which populations are served under those purposes. Unique characteristics and benefits of tribal TANF. In the next couple of slides, this just will go back and further clarify the graphic and just gives more detail. So one, there are a few unique characteristics and benefits for tribal TANF. Tribal TANF provides the opportunity for tribes to design services that best meet the individuals they plan to serve in their community. So unique services in the community can be established. It provides the opportunity for support services to families who may benefit from a particular service but do not meet the financial criteria. Most often the financial criteria is described in the tribal TANF plan, and so that's where a tribe will break down under purposes 1 and 2. There's a family must meet 150% or below of the federal poverty level. And under purpose 3 and 4, they may say that a family is eligible for these types of services if they meet 300% or more of the federal poverty level. So there's different distinctions for how tribal TANF plans are designed and how the program is designed to meet the needs based on the income and resource limits. And the tribes get to establish that. Another unique characteristic is that tribal TANF facilitates the provision of diversion and support services that assist families who are at risk of losing their ability to be self-sufficient. It also allows for the development and implementation of culturally relevant approaches for program activities, support services, and case management. And it also facilitates services and activities that strengthen the family and community cohesion. Purposes of TANF. Just to reiterate the two types of services, again, there was assistance and then otherwise known as cash assistance, benefits, vouchers designed to meet a family's ongoing needs, such as food, clothing, shelter, and utilities. And then there's assistance is always limited to needy families. So in tribal TANF, if the service is considered assistance, then there's always going to be an income and resource limit attached to that. And then their families receiving assistance are also subject to time limits and work requirements, and I'll touch on that later. One of the purposes of TANF is definitely to get individuals self-sufficient and to work, and so through the time limits and the work requirements, that's our goal of meeting that need under the TANF rules. And so, and then also we have the supportive services, which can be made available to needy families or the other eligible families. And so, again, it just meets the income and resource limits if it's a needy family, and then for other eligibles, there's the other objective criteria that the tribe can establish on their own. And that's some of the differences between state TANF and tribal TANF, if you're familiar with state TANF, is the fact that the tribes have more flexibility to determine what needs are there in the community and how to design programs that are culturally relevant and will help the people being served. Next, we have what services are funded. Again, we have two types of services, assistance and supportive services, and this just again reiterates there's cash payments, vouchers, other forms of benefits designed to meet a family's ongoing needs, and then the time limit and work requirements under assistance, and then support services. Use of TANF funds. Support services, and so in this slide it's examples of supportive services. And so supportive services can encompass a lot of different things as long as it meets one of the 4 purposes of TANF. We wanted to provide a couple of examples here in this list. This is not exhaustive, There's a link at the bottom of this slide that takes you to what we call our TANF funding guide, which provides additional examples and definitions of supportive services. But for purposes of this slide, there are work supports, and the work supports provide job search and job readiness or placement services, subsidized wages, transitional services. So if you have someone who's working and maybe they need gas vouchers or assistance with bus tickets or transportation costs, some type of training costs to get them ready to go to work, or they're now employed, that's allowed and considered a supportive service. Removal of barriers to employment, so you could have someone, again, the transportation, child care, case management, pregnancy prevention, and family maintenance. You can offer, we have some tribes that offer positive Indian parenting. They have responsible fatherhood programs that they're using. Motherhood and fatherhood is sacred. This is an opportunity for maybe youth work, and so there could be sex education programs, after-school programs, those items. And really, if we went back to the 4 purposes, under examples of supportive services, we would start to break down each of these different supportive services under which purpose they could be allowable under. And then another example of support services would be family and community economic development. And so matching contributions for individual development accounts, establishing job training programs, diversion services. Recognizing we have a mixed audience on the call today, on the webinar today, I just want to be sure that we put out there kind of the things to remember for the use of TANF funds. And so one is that all services must meet one of the 4 statutory purposes of TANF. All services must benefit TANF families that meet the eligibility criteria established in the tribe's TANF plan. At any point when our agency is looking at whether or not there is an allowable cost or an unallowable cost, or even if the service met one of the 4 purposes of TANF, we always go to the tribal TANF plan because the plan has been approved, and the plan is approved for a 3-year period. And so at any point, if the tribe is changing the way their program service delivery is going to occur, then they have to come back into us and amend their tribal TANF plan to say we're changing something about our systems or our services in our program, because that's what we look to determine what criteria was established. All services, again, must be included in the plan. TANF funds may not be used to contribute to subsidized non-TANF programs. So our funds cannot be used to match a requirement for another federal program. Our funds can't be used to take the place of another program when funding has fallen short in that program area. And we always just play by the rule of, when in doubt, just contact ACF for prior approval and guidance to ensure that all funds are being spent in accordance to either the 4 purposes or what your plan intended you to spend those funds on. Other uses of TANF funds, unfortunately our program, based on our statute, does not allow for pre-award startup costs. And so when a tribe is in their planning stages for becoming a tribal TANF program, and I'll discuss that a little more later, we don't allow for any startup grants. And so that sometimes can be a problem for tribes when they're thinking about wanting to start a tribal TANF program. TANF funds can't be used in violation of the Social Security Act, which is the act that authorized PERORA. And then TANF funds can't be used for construction, purchase of facilities, buildings, or land. Many times in Native communities, the TANF grant can sometimes be one of the largest federal grants that a tribe may get. And unfortunately, we cannot allow the funds to be used to build facilities that may be needed. We really work with the tribe to try to figure out other sources of funding because we can't have any construction costs. We don't have a match requirement. for our funds, and so what the tribes get, they don't have to worry about matching, which is also a difference between state and tribal TANF. And then states aren't required to give the tribe a portion or what we call maintenance of effort funds. And so tribes really then are, we encourage them to negotiate and work with the state for the hopes that they'll build those relationships with the state and that the state may end up giving them additional funds, but there is not a requirement by our statute that that happens. And then, and if the state does decide to give the tribe funds, then that is an agreement between the state and the tribe. So now I'll go into a little bit of starting a tribal TANF program. So starting a TANF program, tribes, as I've stated previously, have a lot of flexibility in designing their own programs to include. They can define their own service area and population. So that means in a reservation setting or in a reservation area, if the tribe only wants to serve their own enrolled members, they can say we'll only serve our own enrolled members, and for all other federally recognized tribal members, they'll be served by either another tribal TANF program if there's one in the area, or they would be served by the state. And so tribal programs get to define Indian and Indian family for the purposes of the program, establish eligibility criteria. One other difference between state TANF and tribal TANF is for tribal criteria for eligibility, if the tribe decides that an individual does not have to cooperate with child support enforcement rules, then that's not a condition of eligibility, and they outline that in their tribal TANF plan to us. The tribe gets to establish the cash assistance amount. If a state TANF program offers for a household of three, $370, and the tribe decides that they can afford, based on their funding, to offer a household of three, $410 a month, then they are allowed to establish that. And then the tribe establishes the time limits. As a general rule, there is a 60-month lifetime limit, and that's the federal rule, 60-month lifetime limit on receiving TANF under the federal guidelines. However, a tribe can be more restrictive of that, and so if they want to say that an individual can only receive TANF for 48 months, then they can establish that and have that in their tribal TANF plan. The tribe also gets to define acceptable work activities. In the state TANF regs, it's very clear what the work activities are. Under tribal TANF, the work activities are inclusive not only of the job search, job readiness, but also it's inclusive of, and later on I get into a little bit of this, but it's also inclusive of your subsidized employment, your cultural work activities. Tribes are allowed to say that, hey, we want individuals to go to language preservation class, and we're going to count that towards work participation hours. And so that's allowable under tribal TANF rules. Tribes also get to negotiate their work participation rates and the required work hours that they're going to have individuals to meet. And then they also are able to establish how they're going to sanction individuals who are not meeting the program guidelines. On this slide, there's also a link to a webinar that we did previously, and so that's on broadening the scope of work activities using cultural activities in tribal communities. I encourage you to check it out. It goes into more detail about 3 different programs around the country that are using their cultural value systems and cultural work activities to help individuals to meet the TANF goals. Important considerations for starting a tribal TANF program. You've heard me talk about time limits, so this just goes into what reg and kind of our definition of time limits, and especially as it's defined for TANF assistance, and that, again, is any exceptions to time limits have to be in the tribal TANF plan. And then there is one additional exception for individuals living in Indian country, that when there is 50% or more not employed, and so for those tribes that operate programs in those communities, the 60-month lifetime limit is the months aren't counted, because there's a recognition that it's harder to put individuals into work activities and work placement in communities that are really don't have jobs, and there's high rates of not employed and unemployment. So there are some exemptions in our regs that deal with that as related to Indian country. And then again, tribes, the work participation and negotiation of the work participation rate. And that rate negotiation is really based on economic conditions and the resources available in those communities. And if a tribe does not meet their work participation rate, we do have, that they've negotiated and set, then we do have fiscal penalties that, that the tribe is subject to. Starting a TANF program, this is just more for how a tribe actually initiates the process for when they are wanting to have their own program and be directly funded by us. And so they submit a letter of intent to my office. We then contact the state. So if the tribe is in the state of Montana, we then contact the state of Montana and request data for the number of Native American families served and the expenditures for the tribe's proposed service area based on fiscal year 1994. The tribe and state agree on the data. If the tribe and state can't come to agreement on the data, then we have systems in place for the tribe to request that ACF makes the data determination. Those happen very rarely. Normally the tribe and the state do come to some type of agreement. And then we determine the tribe's family assistance grant based on the data and the expenditures from the 1994 AFDC caseload and jobs program. And then the tribe works to submit an administrative cost cap proposal, and then they submit a TANF plan for review and approval, and then the program is funded. In most cases, it takes more than a year for a tribe to go through start to finish of actually having a program, and we've had some that sometimes take a little longer because at the same time there's challenges. And so part of the challenge is the tribe has to develop infrastructure and systems, and in some cases that's where if there was startup funding, then the tribe may be able to do more of that. But in many cases, the tribe has to use their own tribal funds to really develop the systems or to build the infrastructure. And so when I say infrastructure, that is how many staff they may need to put on the case, if they're planning to hire a contractor, if they're working on developing their program, they have to have the dedicated staff. They have to have the internal controls and the financial and fiscal accountability processes in place. Another challenge, as I mentioned, there's no pre-award or startup funds. At times, the tribes are dealing with large caseloads based on today and not 1994, and so the funding is based on 1994. And then a tribe then has to figure out, well, how do we make up for the additional funding? And of course, hiring and retaining qualified staff is a huge issue. There's a lot of turnover in many of our programs, and so our tribes say this. And so really trying to keep qualified staff, coordinating with tribal, state, and federal partners, and then just overcoming some of the reporting barriers. On this slide is another link to a document that was created some years ago, and that is operating TANF opportunities and challenges for tribes and tribal consortia. And so that is something else. If you're more interested in tribal TANF and knowing more, you can definitely check that out as well. Challenges and unique aspects, compliance and practical challenges, ensuring all services meet a statutory purpose of TANF, ensuring service provisions to families who meet the eligibility criteria is established in the tribe's TANF plan. Sometimes when there's a change in staff, there's a change in philosophy. We don't always get the change in philosophy in the plan, and so then we have to work with the new staff to really do this. Ensuring that all TANF funds are not used to contribute to or subsidize non-TANF programs, and ensuring the goals and objectives of the program achieved through consistent, comprehensive case management, enforcement of program requirements and policy. Many times, a lot of our programs, the administrators, they have to bring their council up to speed, their tribal leadership up to speed on the program, and so when there's a leadership change, they have to do something different as well, because not all the time is council or their tribal leadership in agreement on them, maybe sanctioning a customer, and so the participant goes to the council and complains, and then the TANF program is told, well, you should be giving them this assistance. And so then the TANF program administrator has to explain to their leadership what all the rules are. And so there's challenges that come with that. And so, most of our programs do a really good job with having the balance and being in small communities and really knowing many of the people they're serving or being family, and really having to establish those boundaries. Additional challenges, just inconsistent understanding, that's the example I just gave, professional boundaries, limited resources, and geographic isolation. Many of our 69 programs are in rural communities, not in urban communities. When we start to talk about Alaska, some of the villages may only have 2 or 3 participants, and in order for the case manager or the staff to see someone, they're actually taking the application over the phone, or they get on the plane to go out to the village. And so the screen or windshield time is definitely a real issue when you're in Indian country. We also have that the alignment of our regulatory requirements and restrictions with cultural values, navigating multiple bureaucracies, understanding and accurately complying with multiple regulatory and statutory guidelines and restrictions. So these are, again, just more of the unique challenges that our staff work with the tribes on an ongoing basis. And then there's a broad range of diversity in the program design, service provision, resources, capacity, and just from coast to coast. Every program has the same framework, but then there's different ways of engagement, and some are using home visiting as a tool, whereas some are using possibly drug testing and engagement for ensuring that all the barriers are removed in order to get individuals to work. There's opportunities for innovative program practice, approaches, and partnership, and the cultural community and historical assets that can contribute to the strength of the program and to have positive outcomes. And I think that that's the big thing about Tribal TANF, is that it's very much the goal of the program is that the tribes get to design a program that's going to help people to succeed in their communities. So then we just have here key players in how important it is, not only for starting a tribal TANF program, but for the ongoing success of a tribal TANF program, and collaborating with other tribal, state, and federal programs. And it's not always easy to build the partnerships. Tribes are sovereign governments, and so therefore we respect that, and we deal with our tribes on a government-to-government relationship, and really work hard to encourage them to work with state and county offices. You've got to have all these groups in the loop: the state, the county, the tribal council, tribal leadership, your tribal community, and then we have us, the Office of Family Assistance, as well. This slide is just our current sources of guidance. So we have our statute under the Social Security Act. The Tribal TANF regs are 45 CFR Part 286. And then on our website, we have a number of program instructions, information memoranda, and then also guidance pieces. And our website is listed on this slide as well. And then here we have our regional office contacts. For the most part, it starts at Region 4 through 10. We have one tribe in Region 4, and they're in North Carolina. The others are in Region 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, the bulk being in Regions 9 and 10. And currently we have 10 tribes that are in the process of somewhere in the process of between letter of intent and almost being approvable to have their own tribal TANF program. So we are a growing program, but our regional offices are the first point of contact for our tribal TANF program. And the tribes then work with their regional contacts. And so if you have additional questions or know of a tribe that's interested, please be sure to share this contact information with them. And I will open it up for questions at this time. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Gaither, for that overview. And I'd just like to remind everyone to use the Q&A pod. You can type your questions in there, and we'll take some time to respond to any questions that you have about this program. I did have one question for you, Dr. Gaither. As far as if people see a need for this within a specific tribe, are there what would be a first step, or who should someone contact in order to try to take that first step of coming up with a plan, or trying to just establish what might be needed to start something like this?
Okay, so there's two things that can be done. One, on our website, we actually have some guidances as well as question and answers regarding the letter of intent process. And then two, contacting their respective regional office. And so just contacting the program manager that's on this list.
Okay, wonderful. Don't see any other questions yet. So yeah, we'll just have a few minutes. We'll give a few more minutes to get those questions in. But while we're waiting, I'll just remind everyone that we will have a survey. If you are interested in letting us know what you think about our webinars, please stay online after we close out, and hopefully you'll be redirected to our survey. If not, I will include the link in my follow-up email to everyone who attended. Yeah, and we just thank everyone for being here. Anything else that you wanted to cover? I don't see any questions yet, Dr. Gaither. So if there's any other thoughts you'd like to share with us, we would love to hear it.
No, I just thank anyone for their time, and my contact information is on the first slide. So if there are additional questions or anything I can help anybody with, feel free to contact me.
Great. I'll put that up here as we finish up. And yeah, so just want to thank everyone again so much, and thank you, Dr. Gaither. It's just wonderful to hear about the programs and the opportunities that there are for tribes to receive assistance through your program. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll end at this time, and I'll just let everyone know that you will be redirected to our survey, and thanks so much for attending.
Thank you.